So yeah, well, of course. And so good morning, and thank you all so much for taking the time to join today. It's fun to know that this is more of an international Zoom today. I know that in the beginning we were chatting with some people from the Midwest, and I think there are also some from the East. So it's nice to have all of you here. So good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. Thank you again. So what today is basically a session to cover all of the Davines color families. What I like to do, and it's probably just for me to keep it fresh as well, but I'm going to kind of cover it in the context of literally where we are today. So I'm going to share some insights and some of my thoughts based on the fact of that we've had a bit of a pause and what will color look like coming back to work behind the chair, and so some things to consider. So those are going to be some topics that'll incorporate into all of the different options for Davines color. So with that, of course, based on your needs, your experience, ask any questions, and then, we can kind of expand, or if there isn't any questions, then I move on to the next topic. So it really is going to be sort of, driven, and you can kind of, take lead in where you'd like this to go to. So with that, again, just a reminder, this is a recorded session. The login is my phone number. So at any point, even if you don't want a recording, but later you want to have a chat or more information, I'm happy to have a chat with you and to further connect. So Davines has many different color options. I think that this is such an incredible support for us, because how I like to look at it is in anything that you do and you get very involved in and very passionate about, or even something that you take seriously, you want to have more than one option, because different situations arise and we often have different needs. So I often bring up the fact of, if we're all to go and order a coffee, we're going to order coffees in different ways. For our hair texture, and also our hair, styles and length and color, everything is going to be different. And our hair is going to behave differently, but actually our bodies are going to behave differently. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on today, which could be interesting to notice, is that I really wanted to give some focus on the difference between mask with fiberchrome and a new color being our non-ammonia option, and our mask with fiberchrome being our ammonia option. They both are permanent colors, but sometimes what we find is that over time, either taking a break from something or excessive use, some people can, just like in anything, you can all of a sudden build up kind of a sensitivity to something where maybe it doesn't work as well from a standpoint of irritation, even from a standpoint of smell. And so my thoughts were, if I think about what's going on right now and how we've had such little sensory kind of connection. So that means like we're not touching people as much, we're not interacting with people as much, which also means we don't have, the same kind of sound that we're hearing. When you think of entering a salon, it can be quite loud and energetic and like people all around. So all of that is shut down for us. And so we may find our systems to be more sensitive. And so with that, even the smell of a very low base ammonia line could be more sensitive to us because we've taken a break, right? It's something that we're not used to. And so these are things that we can kind of cover today of what that could look like, but also knowing that if people have taken a long amount of time without coming to see us, there's going to be two options most likely that will happen. One is they're going to have a lot more regrowth, or the other is that they've messed with things themselves. So both of those are going to require us to use our, our creativity, but also our skill set to really address that at the time, and to not kind of just be like, oh, do you want the same thing? Because the same thing, it's like saying we're going to return to business the same way we used to do business. So those will be interesting things that I think we can kind of consider when we're working through all of the different options. A few more people joined us. So again, good morning and thank you for joining. We're just going through the Davines color families. So I always want to think that as a consumer, they have the right, if you're a guest or consumer, they have the right and should know what it is that you are using. And so for me, I think we often have a missed opportunity where we don't actually share our passion or the reason for why. I think it would be important for people to know that Davines has, different color options, but also the fact of the environmental and the sustainability aspects of Davines. And so that they're using color lines that are going to be better for the environment, that are going to be biodegradable, that are going to be using natural ingredients whenever they can assist the performance, but also knowing that the packaging is going to be much less waste than your standard packaging. Anytime that you look at packaging, which is paper, and it doesn't have a high gloss to it, you're going to know that generally that is going to be much better for the environment. Anytime that you see paper that has a high gloss, for one, it's going to involve a more chemical process when you're manufacturing it, but it also isn't going to have the same ability to break down. So all of our packaging, when you look at this, is going to be working with what's considered FSC paper. So that's Forestation Stewardship Council. That means that the paper for these boxes is from recycled materials, but also from trees that were planted with this purpose. So as a consumer, I would want to know, specifically at a time like this, where there is going to be some more waste because of so many single-use items, that can be offset. Or one, Green Circle will take all of your single-use items back. So if we're going to be wearing, masks and gloves and various disposable items, Green Circle will take that back. But also for the consumers to know that they're using, color on their hair that is more environmentally supportive. So this paper itself, because of the fact that it's vegetable-based ink and water-soluble glues, can even be composted. So recycled is a great option, but it can also be put in the compost because of the fact of its ability to break down. Whereas when you see shiny paper, that's not going to have the same ability to break down. Also, from a sustainability standpoint, when we look at mixing ratios, this tube is longer and larger. So you're looking at 100 mils. And because of the mixing ratio, which when we're mixing the standard mixing ratio, you're doing 1 part to 1.5. And so that's going to allow this color to go longer, but by making a larger tube, it means less manufacturing. When we manufacture, we also are completely zero impact. So zero impact meaning that there will be no negative impact on the environment, and that we purchase carbon credits through Ethiotrees, which is a company that is nonprofit in Ethiopia that plants trees, works with water irrigation, and works with the local communities to create a well-balanced environment and planet. So that's going to be one of the factors here. When we work with a new color, although the tube size is smaller, the mixing ratio will still last as long because you're using the tube with a cream base and the activator. So that's going to allow both of them to have less production, which is more favorable in the environment, but also for a financial standpoint to last longer and to go further. Because sustainability is not just about the environment, it's actually about our ability to have longevity in whatever it is we do. So those are going to be important factors. For Davines, the energy that the facility operates, so the Davines Village, is 100% going to come from renewable energy, which means it can come from rain, sun, it can come from wind, but also it comes from geothermic energy, which means energy coming from the center of the earth. So now when you think of a choice to have a color brand, not only does the color brand perform, but it supports all of the environmental cycle, which keeps our planet well and alive. So those are things that I think are worth sharing with the end consumer when they're understanding why with those colors. Now for us as a stylist, when I think of why would I use Mask with Fiberchrome as a color line, for me there's going to be many different reasons, but I'm going to share a few first before we kind of get into it. One of them is the fact that I really appreciate that we have 4 different options of natural for great coverage. So for me, when I think of personalizing a formula for someone, a time like this, we definitely know that if we make our formulas too simple and too straightforward of just like a level 6 natural, that's kind of average. And nobody really wants to become average, right? Like everyone wants to feel like they have something that's special and unique for them. And so with that, it's important that we have different options for great coverage for depending on the end result, but as well that we have so many different reflex, which you'll see in here for these options, that can help personalize it for you. I think as stylists, we hear keywords that the end consumer says to us, like, I don't want gold, I don't want red. But what we forget is that we're using our knowledge for gold and red. We're not actually remembering their knowledge for gold and red. And so what I mean by that is that sometimes if you were to show people, I'll just go into the brown reflex. If you were just to show them a whole like selection of browns and you're to say, what brown do you like? They're like, oh, I hate brown with red. And then you'd watch and they'd pick one that in our mind, we know has red in it. And so what that tells us is that their vision of red is different than our knowledge of red. And so that translation goes sideways because we just eliminate anything with red in it, but they're just meaning this one portion. Like maybe they don't like the mahogany reds, maybe they don't like the copper reds, maybe they don't like brassiness, but they actually may like warmth. So with blondes, with browns, with reds, whatever it is, I like to kind of hear what they're saying, but I like to look at what they're using. I remember we were doing a class with Rock LeMay, one of our amazing colorists, which you should definitely check out his classes. But with that, we were doing this model and she's like, oh my gosh, it always has to be ash. Like I need my blondes to be ash. So we're going through the consultation and he pulls out the blonde swatches and I'm gonna see if I can find it here quickly because it was such a good one. And so she says that she would like to have, where is the color? I know I was just kind of being spontaneous in this. So then it's like now when I want to find it, it's going to be more difficult. But she basically says that she wants to have completely ash color. And then she's like, yeah, I kind of like this color. So if you can see up close, this is a 9-3. So it doesn't mean that we need to use 9-3 on her because she may already have some gold there. But we all know that this is definitely not ash. So again, just kind of seeing what does someone say and what do we hear and kind of merging it together. So I want to think of this time frame and like I mentioned it as a pause. I feel like it sounds nicer that way. So when we have like a pause in the industry, it gives us a chance to revisit everything. We revisit how we do our, how we live our everyday life. We revisit so many parts of how we do things. So one of the workshops that I'm actually going to work on next Wednesday, which you may be interested in, so it's Wednesday at 11 o'clock Vancouver time, is going to be virtual consultations. I believe this can be a very, very effective way. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but when you're going out and if you're dealing with, a vet or a doctor or, any other types of more like appointments in that way, they're all doing virtual consultations, which means they're either doing a FaceTime or they're doing a clear conversation to understand what it is that you're going to need and do so that you're in their environment much less. So I'm all about this because the whole concept is we're supposed to have more space between us. We're supposed to be together for less amounts of time. And of course, we're supposed to be covered and protected. So if we want to maximize how we can do our job, I'm like, let's have a virtual consultation. I want to see like the FaceTime. I want to know like what are someone's regrowth like. I want to know if they have a band. And none of this is shaming or making someone feel bad, but it's actually kind of exciting because it's like, okay, so that's what we're going to do. And so with that, we're going to have to do a few different steps. And that's going to allow us to get the end result that you're looking for. At the same time, it will give you an incredible time to be able to prescribe what products they should be using to either adjust and manage their scalp, which sometimes can be irritated under stress, but also just from maybe the lack of care or lack of good use of products, and maybe even from the fact that they haven't had their hair cut as often. So you literally in the virtual consultation can address what's happening with the scalp, the hair, the color, all in one. So when they come in, you literally get them in the chair, make sure that it is visually as you thought it was, touch base, and you just go and mix everything. And when they go to leave, they have their product package already ready in a Davines cloth bag, so that they're ready to go, and out the door they go in least amount of time possible. But with that, we also can have the opportunity to adjust our pricing. So when I look at that, if someone comes in and they have this much regrowth, it's not going to be the same cost that it was before. If they've colored it themselves and there's a band, then we may have to be, like say we open up June 1st. And I know again, because there's other people on the call, some people may be opening in May, or you may even be open now. But regardless, it's like if you see a band, it's like, okay, so we're doing, some color cleansing to remove, unwanted color. And so those are all things that you can factor in ahead of time so that you are prepared to support whatever it is that they're going to have. So with that, going back to the reasons for me with Davines color with massive fiberchrome is we'll start again with the 4 naturals. So the 4 naturals, when we're looking at gray coverage, we're going to have the naturals, which go from 1 to 10. And then we're also going to have the double naturals or the natural intense, as you can see here, which is going from a 3-3 to a 9-9. So the double number first means it's double natural or natural intense. So if you think of our naturals as having the 3 primary colors, we are going to sit a little bit more on the cooler side, meaning a little bit more on the blue side. If we mix equal portions of all colors, blue, red, and yellow, naturally blue is a little bit darker and is going to have a little bit more control than the yellow. So that's where you're going to see that it is going to seem, or people may say it's like a blue base line, but it's just the fact that it has great control. For me, having more of a blue base to it or more control means that when I put that color on anyone's hair, I'm going to be controlling the unwanted warmth that sometimes is brought to the party. So having it more along the blue side is going to be more ideal from my perspective. But all of these are going to give you the 4 naturals, which these are 2 of them, will give you 100% gray coverage. But coverage can look different to different people. So depending on your texture of hair, so finer hair like a piece of thread and thicker hair like a piece of rope, that hair, the diameter, so the diameter meaning the kind of the roundness of it is going to be different. So if we looked at like a fine piece of thread, it's like a tinier hole versus a thicker one for something that is going to be more coarse or thicker hair texture. So when we want to change that color and we want to deposit, then you may have to use different things to get that job done. A finer texture of hair like mine, I can get 100% gray coverage in just the naturals. Believe it or not, I actually can also get 100% gray coverage with a 10 volume, and I'll get into that in a minute. But if you have coarser, wiry, more dense, thicker hair, you may need to go with the double naturals because it's giving you double the pigment. How you could think of this is when we look at our naturals, this could be more like something that's like tights or nylons. And then if we were going to say that this is tights, then we would say the double natural is like leggings, right? So tights versus leggings. Hopefully if you have leggings, that means no matter what you do not see your skin through it. Whereas when you have tights, depending on the light and the way that it reflects, you may be able to see some dimension. It doesn't mean that there will be gray when we're looking at the natural. What it means is it's going to be dimensional. When we think of children's hair and hair that's never been colored, so beautiful virgin hair, it is never one flat, solid color. It has dimensions. And so when we think of how does color-treated hair work, sometimes our minds want us to think inky solid because we're looking so close. We're like, I don't want to see any dimension. But if you look at someone across the room and someone has solid inky color, their hair looks very colored. Now in a case like mine, I like to have black hair, so I'm okay with it having that densey kind of like inky shade, although Davines will never do that, but I'm happy to have what I'm meaning is more solid coverage. But if you're sitting in the browns or you're sitting in the blonde tones, it's nice to have that reflection and tones. Here's a few reasons why. One is it looks more natural. But also when hair grows out, so if people chose, say a few people that come to see you back into the chair, they're not working right away. And maybe for them, coming in the every 3 to 4 to 6 weeks is going to be a stretch for them. Maybe they're going to need to leave it every 2 months. Again, supporting your guests and your friends, the people that come to see you, and saying maybe we should shift to something that is a little bit more dimensional so that then when you come in again, it's not going to have so much of a solid line. It's going to have more of a natural finish where it fades. So that's where you're going to see the difference between the natural and the double natural or natural intense is going to be how intense the pigments are. You could also think of it as like a brown piece of cellophane for the naturals and 2 to 3 pieces of natural brown cellophane put together. And you can see how you would see more dimension. Sometimes I say lip gloss versus lipstick, or 1 coat of nail polish versus 2. So all of them are going to be what's considered coverage. It just depends on how intense you want that, but also what is the hair texture that you're putting it on. Again, now is the time when our clients come back to us for us to reassess and remind ourselves of that. And even having that conversation with your clients to say, hey, look, if your hair is growing this much every 3 weeks, because I color my hair every 2.5 weeks because of how gray it is and because of how dark it is. But not everyone can have that ability to do it. So with that, if they need to get their hair colored all that often, they may not want it to be so solid inky because they don't want to have such a strong line, because the growth is going to happen no matter what it is that you do. So that's going to be your difference between your natural and your double natural intense. Now let's go to the natural ash. When we look at our natural ash, this is going to be with a 0.1. And in a minute, I'll go through what our color reflex are. So our 0.1 is an ash, which is a blue. So in this case, let's say you're working with a level 5 person's hair. So the person has naturally level 5, but they feel like when they get great coverage, it starts to feel too dark for what they now want. It's kind of funny because we feel like, the blondes kind of start to move a little darker naturally in their life, and the people with dark hair start to go a little lighter, and we kind of all meet in that like 7 to 5 or 4 range eventually. So in this case, if someone is a 5 and they want to have a 6, you're still going to be able to do great coverage, and you're still going to be able to get the solid coverage you want, but you may want to use a little bit or use the natural ash to help control that factor. So that's going to be where you're going to find the natural ash is going to be great for controlling even more warmth than what the line controls already. Now we have our natural warms. Our natural warms are numbers without any points behind them. So I'm going to show you here, just as a good reminder when you're looking at the tubes, that you know what it is that you're using. So this is a 6, which is a natural warm. This is a 6.0, which is a double natural or natural intense. And this is a 6.0, which is our natural. And sorry, there should be a 6.1, which is our natural ash, and all of them will give you great coverage. So with the natural warm, what is that? The natural warm is what a level 4, I'm like, what am I pointing at? What a level 4 is if you were to go in the sun for 2 weeks. So at a level 4, you're going to see a little bit more of the reds and coppers that are going to kind of come forward into the way that the color is. Whereas a level 5, and as we go lighter, you're going to see more of the coppers and more golds. So each of these, we can't call it a gold line. We say that it's what's underlying that pigment. And that's why whatever my hair would look like in the sun, if I went more in the sun, I'm going to pull more red, whereas someone that's lighter is going to pull possibly more golden or more copper. So the natural warm will be whatever is underlying that pigment. So it's a nice way to kind of bring brightness, and some ways just to bring out what the hair naturally would be present with. So how do these work for gray coverage? We have a great tool that's called a gray coverage finder or identifier. And this tells us what each of those numbers or levels, so whether you're a 3, a 5, or a 7, what does 50% gray look like? The great thing about it is, for one, sometimes it helps us know, to mix our formula, but also sometimes when we look at a 3.0 with 50% versus a 3 there, sorry, I've got to cover this up, it will be confusing to our eye. We may think that the 3.0 is actually a 4 when we see all of that gray present. If we formulate incorrectly, that's where we often get more warmth than we want. If you start to notice that you're pulling too much warmth, you may need to go darker in your formula because you may have misdiagnosed. I saw kind of a fun photo where someone took a picture of someone's hair and they were putting the swatch on to try to determine what it is. And they said, take a picture and change it to black and white. And that will help you know what is the level. And I was like, that's clever. I actually hadn't heard of that. But mine is I usually will squint. Like when I squint, then it's like one blends in and the other stands out if you're ever trying to decide between the two. But regardless, that's going to be a tool to help you identify, does the person have 50%? Or also for us to identify the fact of what it is, their actual level. So when we're working with all four of these naturals, what you're going to find is that you need to use at least a third of your formula to be one of those naturals for great coverage. That's the rule. Personally, as a colorist, and just for the simplicity of mixing, I always like to say 50%. And that's not a Davines thing, that's just how I tend to mix. I always say 50% of the formula, one of the four naturals to give you great coverage. Keep in mind, all of these naturals, though, they can have the ability to be able to give you great coverage, but solid if you just wanted to use the whole tube. But they also are going to be able to just give you just the color that you want based on what you see. So it can be used as a color. So if you wanted an ash color, then you could be happily to use that. So let's go through what the numbers are so that as we go through the reflex, I don't kind of confuse you with that we got this all clear. So as you can see, this is the color wheel. What I like about the visual of a color wheel, which can be new for some people to use, is that it helps you see where the numbers sit compared to the reflex, but it also helps you get the visual of the depth. So when we look at reflex, so if we have a reflect, meaning it's a level 6 copper, I like to think of it as the depth of an ocean, like going deeper as in darker. Our reflex, the 3 booklets I showed you, and I'll refer back to, are not going to have 50% natural. Many brands that you'll work with in the past are going to have 50% natural. Here's why I prefer a brand that doesn't have 50% natural, that is primarily the reflect. If I want red, I'm going to get red at its full capacity. If I wanted to add brown, I can add one of the naturals. If I want to have ash, meaning I want to control the warmth, then I can have ash and green and blue bases or control factors on their own without natural. The minute that you add natural, you lose your ability to control and you lose your ability to enhance. So that's why for me, for Davines, I love having 4 naturals to pick from. I also like to have reflex that are exactly the tone without the natural. And again, the way you know the difference from a level 1 to a level 10 is just thinking of it being darker and depth and not having the brown. So if I was a redhead and we did my formula and we wanted to pull the color through to have great vibrancy, if we pulled it through with a red or a copper, I would get beautiful red and copper shining and singing. If you had natural in that formula, you would mud out or kind of like make it murky, the mids and the ends, and they wouldn't have the vibrancy of the reds or the coppers. The same with the ash. If I wanted to control warmth and I wanted to do a tint back and I didn't like the fact that my hair was feeling red, I would want to make sure that I had every bit I can of control without the natural diluting that ability. So again, there's going to be 3 points already that I brought up. For Davines, for me, sustainability and the environmental positioning with it, from the packaging, from the zero impact, from the renewable energy, and all of the stories associated, having 4 natural options for great coverage, and now having reflex, which are pure as the reflect dictates and shares by the color on the tube. So now, the naturals and the natural intents are sitting here. So when I was talking about our naturals for great coverage, they're sitting smack in the blue area primarily. Now when we're going to look and we're going to work at our ashes, then we're going to see that the ashes are sitting in through here. So they're still in the blue, but they are kind of moving over into the side, kind of with that control with the violet. So our 1s and our 0s are going to sit more in this area here. Now our 2, which is considered our violet or iris, is sitting in the violet tones. Our 3, which is a gold, is sitting in the golden area. Our 4, which is a copper, is sitting in the coppers. A 5, which is a mahogany, is sitting in this range between the red and the violet. And our 6, which is a red, is sitting in the reds. And our 7, which is the green, is sitting kind of in through the green and almost into this yellow, which actually creates a very nice brown or neutral control. And so then when we're looking at 8s, our 8s are going to be solid green. So that's going to be how the color wheel works. So when you see the numbers, you're going to be able to determine the fact of what is the actual reflect. So what I mean by that is, when you're looking at the numbers here, let's go through and pick this one, a 5, 7, 3. So the 5 is going to be the depth of a 5, but not 50% brown. Then it's going to read 7, which is our beige, which is a cool kind of green yellow, and 3, which is a gold. This is a beautiful formula to be able to create a very neutral, but at the same time kind of full, kind of almost like chocolatey feeling to our brown. How does the 7 and the 3 work for the amounts? We always want to say that the 7 is the primary reflect, so that's going to be the focus of it, is going to be the beige. And then the 3 is just like a sparkle or like a little additive of gold. We can't really say what percentage is the 7 versus the 3 universally for all of our colors. And again, like we touched on in the beginning, when I said that if we have blue, red, and yellow, and we put the same amount in a bowl and we stirred it up together, the first color that would disappear without having any ability to control or enhance would be yellow, because yellow is lighter. And then it would be red, and then it would be blue. So if we said, by chance, that the formula was 35% of one and 15% of another, it wouldn't be realistic because it would change depending on what the reflect is. So I hope I haven't confused you in that. What I mean is that if you have primarily gold, and say that's 35%, and then we're going to have in ash, which is a blue, which is 15%, that 15% could actually control much more than what 15% is. And if we did the reverse, meaning the 35% was blue and the 15% was gold, that gold would be washed out. So what Davines does is every single tube is formulated to give you the visual end result of primary and secondary, as opposed to saying an immediate percentage. If it helps your mind to visualize that it is going to be this much of this and this much of this, then absolutely that can work. But from a scientific perspective, it's not 35% of the mixture and 15, or 75 and 25. It's going to be primary and secondary. So hopefully that makes sense when you're looking at how these reflects work. So then another way to look at it is if you were to imagine a chandelier in the ceiling. So a chandelier with beautiful prisms, so they have all these like sparkly bits. The primary focus of it is going to be, in this case, let's go with another one of our shades that is kind of a signature for us. Let's go with an ash copper. The primary look of the chandelier is going to be ash, and then a tiny bit of sparkle will be the copper. So the ash and the copper don't neutralize or cancel each other out. They're actually pigments that sit beside each other and shimmer. And that's going to be because of the fact of what is the ingredients and how the color pigments and molecules sit beside each other. So with that, you're going to find some unique color formulas, and keep in mind too how important it is to personalize what it is that you're going to use for each of your clients. If at all possible, just like you cut their hair differently, see if you can come up with a unique formula for every single person. I think that that would make everyone feel good to know that they have their own unique color. It also means it's harder for them to replicate, or even for them to show up somewhere else to get the same color. So that's going to be when we look at more of our browns. When we look, oh, sorry, and I also forgot, when we look at some of our brown shades, there also are going to be some of these that's like a 2-1-1, which the 2-1-1 and the 2-2-1, I mix and match in my formula. So when you're doing gray coverage, you do your normal gray coverage for your regrowth, and then you can also kind of mix and match, because for me, I like to use a 1. But then I also like to sometimes do a 2.11, because that's going to have the double ash, so a little bit more blue. And then there's times where I use a 2.21. I think you can probably see that there's a little bit of a blue reflect because the sun is coming in. And that's from using the 2-1-1. So these are going to be great ways a lot of times too, you can use some of these because they're such good control. You can use a dab of them into your formula to get some unique mixtures. Always remember that Davines has a great site called Davines Color on Instagram. And anytime that there's a color on there, they will repost your work if it's clean and beautifully finished. But you also have to show your complete formula with Davines. So in this case, if you ever wanted to kind of get more creative, you can go through that page and see different formulas and then see what do people choose to use. So in this case, moving to the reds, as you can see here, we have reds and coppers, mahoganies, all sorts of different shades for your option. Our reds have such intensity and longevity. They really are incredible and a great performance support for us as colorists. So again, knowing the fact that these are not going to be neutralized out with browns because they are reflex. If you wanted to have any browns, then you have the ability to mix these in. So if I had someone that was a natural redhead or wanted to have red hair with gray coverage, I would probably go with the natural warms as my base for gray coverage and then go into my reds for my reflect. Now let's look at our blondes. Our blondes are going to have the ability to give us tons of different options. So we're going to have lots of different reflex. When we look at blondes and we look at toning, I will be covering view in a few minutes, but it's always interesting to think about the fact of how does permanent color look differently than a demi-permanent color. And so when we're looking at that as a whole, and when we're going to be working with color, it is an important thing to be able to consider how do you want those reflex to look. And so for me, the double toning process is going to be the most effective for longevity. So keep in mind, these are beautiful shades and they are a great support for kind of your primary base as a toner, but you can also use them for blondes in general. We also have an incredible opportunity to use high lifts. When we look at the high lifts, meaning the 12 series, the 12 series is going to give us the ability to get 5 levels of lift. So if we started in the mid-range, in the 5 and the 6, we are not going to end up with this visual. This visual of a swatch is only really going to be effective like this when you're looking at kind of like almost like a 7, probably even more an 8. So these colors are not going to look this way, but what's important is what the numbers tell us. So even at a level 5 or 6, you can use high lifts to get a quite nice kind of caramel or even just a nice light brown as a highlight or as dimensions. There's even, I think, one of our friends that's on Educator that's on the call right now, Tara Lynn, and I believe she uses the high lifts solely to lighten her hair, and she's a beautiful blonde. It has just a nice kind of neutral with just some gold shimmers from here and there, but she's able to use that without using any bleach or lightener to get a beautiful blonde. But of course, it's her starting level that's going to be the important factor. Then we also have a booster. The booster is what's considered our 000. This actually reminds me at this point, if you guys are already using Mask with Vibrochrome, it would be important to check in with yourself and with your swatch book and of course with your consultant to ensure that you have the most updated swatch book, because we do keep having new shades added, and it's important that you're going to, I know where it is, it's in my book. Speaking of that, because the old one used to have it. So the newest book is going to have, and silly me, your booster here and your intensifiers. So I'll go into the booster and then I'll go into the intensifiers. The booster itself is going to have the ability, because of its ammonia content, to lighten hair and give you an extra level of lift. What you have to remember is that there is no pigment in it. So if you have a high lift, that's going to have a higher percentage of ammonia. The 000 booster is going to have about the ammonia content of a level 10. That means you do not want to use, ideally, the booster with anything that's lighter than a level 10 in your color formula. Because if I have a high lift, so let me just grab one again. Let's see, where do we go? Yes, so if I have a 12.18, remember a 1 is a blue and an 8 is a green. I'm liking the benefits of this because it's going to have tons of incredible control. Now, if I use the 000 booster with this, the ammonia content is higher, and the 000 booster is lower. So now I'm diluting my intensity to lighten. But the 000 has no pigment, and this has control pigment. So now I'm even diluting the ability to have control. So it doesn't really make my logical sense to use the 000 booster with this high lift unless it was an intentional decision. So the 000 booster having the lift ability of a level 10 is going to be the times that you want to use that one. Then what you're going to keep in mind is the fact that you are going to be diluting your formula. So if you diluted your formula and you wanted to bring back intensity or control, you have the ability to use these. I hope you can see. So the 0.12 is a blue, right? Violet, blue iris, which is going to be ash. And then you're going to have the 0.18, which is a blue-green, so an ash. And then you're going to have, is that a 2.5? I'm like looking backwards. So yeah, you're going to have a violet mahogany, and then a 6.6, which is a double red. So all of these intensifiers do have ammonia in them. Why it's important to know that they have ammonia in them, it means you can use them on their own as fashion colors, but also you have to factor them into your formula when you're using the activator. Boosters or intensifiers that don't have ammonia, you mix your color as is and then you add them in. Whereas this, you would add it like your color and then add your activator as it goes that way. So hopefully that makes sense for you when we kind of covered it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how the activators work with Mask with Fiberchrome and what's in the tube so that you can be better supported with how that works. And of course, any questions along the way, I'm happy to share. So we have all the way from a 5, 10, 20, 30, and 40 volume. The way to kind of look at this is that our 5 and our 40, I often think of like them being like bookends, meaning that they have different rules for using them. So a 5 volume and a 40 volume are going to be used differently. Everything in between, the mixing ratio will be 1 part color to 1.5 parts activator. Keep your math simple. So for example, 20 grams of color, if I say 1.5 activator, then that means you mix another 20 of your activator, and what's another half of the 20, 10. So it's kind of simple if you just keep your math as simple as possible, and then it becomes normal for you for mixing. Mixing ratio for a 5 and for a 40 can be different. A 5 is going to give us more of a demi type of finish. So what we're going to do, but remember the tube of color has ammonia, so it can shift your natural base in color. So a 5, you would mix 1 part color to 2 parts of the 5 volume. A high lift, you would mix 1 part color or 1 part high lift to 2 parts of the 40 volume. So everything in between is 1 to 1.5, and your 5 and your 40 are 1 to 2. So now let's look about what and why you would use each one. A 5 volume for timing is also going to be as long as or as little as you like, up to around 20 minutes. So that means you may just want it for 5 minutes, you may want it for 10 minutes, because it's just going to be kind of more of that temporary finish that's going to be able to not be permanent in the same capacity. Although keep in mind, again, because the tube has ammonia, it can shift the base that way. The 10 volume is going to be what you use as your deposit and your tone on tone level. So for me, because of my fine hair, I can actually get away with great coverage with a 10 volume. And when I was behind the chair, for a lot of people, I did use a 10 volume because I liked to have a lighter finish to their deposit, and they were quite happy with that too. A 20 volume is going to be our main go-to for great coverage. It also can give deposit, and a 20 volume, keep in mind the 2, 1 less than 2 is 1, can give you 1 level of lift. So that's where if you formulate incorrectly on your scalp, if you think that someone is a level 6, but they're a 5, and you use a level 6, the 20 volume will actually give you 1 level lighter, which means it could pull unwanted warmth. So that's where your diagnosis is so important. So a 20 volume, great coverage, can give you 1 level of lift, and it can also be your deposit. Your 30 volume can also be used for great coverage, but it's different than many lines where they will often say if it's resistant, go there. It can give you it, but our go-to is 20. And our 30 can give us 2 levels of lift. Our 40 will give us 3 levels of lift. And then if we want more levels of lift, we can either use our 000 booster or our high lifts. So that's going to be how you can work with all of those as a whole. So now looking at the fact that you have your 4 great coverage options, you have reflex, which are primary to the way the reflect works, meaning there's not going to be the brown component put in. So your ashes are going to have incredible control and your reds are going to have incredible vibrancy. Then you also have the 000 booster as an additive tool. You have your intensifiers, which you can also work with, and your high lifts, and so many different activators to work with so that you really have the complete support in that. So now, what is in the tube? So keep in mind, Davines loves to be thinking of natural when it can improve the performance. So we have a relationship with a farm in South America, and we use quinoa protein. So quinoa protein is going to give us the ability to give us longevity, but it also helps with the absorption of color pigments. So for us, thinking of, protein is the primary base for color, quinoa is an incredible support for that to be able to allow the penetration and longevity of the color. Then our second factor, so that's going to be our natural factor. Our second factor is going to be omega-9. Keep in mind, Davines manufactures hair care, color, and skincare. Omega-9 is used in skincare. So omega-9, think of kind of what skincare does. It's softening and it's shine. So that's what you're going to find. It's going to also give nice protection to the hair. So you're going to have your shine and you're going to have your longevity and you're going to have your softness from omega-9. Now you're going to look into the fact of, you're going to think of what is in the garment industry. So in the garment industry, we're going to think of silk, fabrics. Our hair is a fiber just like the fibers of silk. So we use the technology, which is a phospholipid carrier. A phospholipid carrier is used in silk coloring. It allows the color pigments to slide in. So the benefit of that is that generally speaking, in a permanent color situation, you need to have the environment where the color is going to allow the cuticle to open for the color pigments to slide in. So the phospholipid carrier allows us to only open up a little bit, which means we can lower our ammonia content so the color pigments slide in beautifully. So that's what you're going to find with our whole color line is we have natural, we have skincare, and we have from the garment industry, the silk industry, and kind of putting those together to give us our incredible gray coverage support. So hopefully that helps you kind of see how you can work with Mask with Fiberchrome with your clients. I have to remind you of the fact that when I very, very first used Davines color, it was a different color. It was mask, but not Mask with Fiberchrome. I was using it prior to having any distribution here or any education. When I followed what the manual said and all of the details associated and did my diagnosis, I had 0 issues. So always remind yourself that when we look at great coverage, application is always going to be key. If you're using a lower ammonia baseline, it's important that you're thinking finer sections and you're applying nicely. With that, if people have been going for a longer period of time without color, you're going to need more color, which means there's going to be an additional cost to that. But you're also going to have to be more detailed with your application because of the fact that you want to make sure that you have your solid coverage. So you're going to need to have more color than you standard would have color. And you're also going to need to do a thicker application than when it's just like my tiny little roots every 3 weeks. So because every 3 weeks, we have the ability, if anything gets missed, to kind of like touch it up and touch over. But in this case, when you have an area like this, that color needs to be perfectly applied. So keep in mind when you're kind of planning accordingly that that's something you need to consider. So with that, timing. Timing is going to be 35 minutes, like I said, for your 10, 20, and 30, and 40 if it's your color. For your high lifts, you're going to be looking at between 55 and closer to sort of that 55 and even up to an hour. When you're looking at your 5 volume, then you're just using it from a few minutes up to 20. So that's going to be kind of how your timing works. But if the hair texture is different, that's where you can, as an artist and as a knowledgeable stylist, know that you can get away with either less or more. If you have a finer texture of hair, and I even don't do this, but you technically could probably rinse 2 minutes early because the time frame that it takes for my hair to get processed being fine is going to be less than someone with coarser, wiry hair. So someone with coarser, wiry hair, it's okay if you choose to, as a stylist, leave it on longer, just knowing about their resistance. It's not a rule, but it's just us understanding. It's like if you're baking cookies all together and you make one that's a tiny mound and a bigger mound, the bigger mound needs to be cooked longer than the tiny mound. So it's just kind of knowing the recipe is going to say cook for 10 or 12 minutes. But you may know because you put so much on there, meaning the hair is thicker or coarser, that you need longer. And that, oh, that one is little, so that one needs less. So again, manufacturer rules will always tell you what is the standard, but you have to remember, are you using it on hair that is the standard and average, or is there something outside of it? So with that, let's move into a new color, our non-ammonia. So like I mentioned, this is something to consider. If you potentially have known that you have a sensitivity to ammonia, feel free to go into a non-ammonia option. I'll share from my own personal perspective. Prior to Mask with Vibrochrome, I actually started to build up an intolerance, so I became irritated by ammonia, probably because I color my hair so often and because I was a busy stylist where a color was constantly being breathed in. And it started to just kind of like not be something that made me feel good, but also if I used it on my own hair, I would get itchy. When Mask with Vibrochrome came out, I was able to switch and use Mask with Vibrochrome with zero irritation. At the same time, in the back of my mind, I have to remember that I may at some point build up an intolerance again or an irritation to ammonia, because it's not about Davines, it's about the ammonia content that my body was, kind of like resistant to. So with that, we have a non-ammonia option, which is our Anew color. Our Anew color is going to be the ones that I was showing you here, which is going to have with the white boxes. What you're going to think of with the non-ammonia color, which is a new color, is that in this case, we are going to use ingredients that are going to be water soluble. They're not a gas emitting into the environment. So with this, we're going to also be using natural based color pigments. And we have what's called metasilicate, which is a cream base. The cream base needs to be alkaline because a permanent color needs to have an alkaline component to be able to open up the cuticle. So with Davines, you'll find the non-ammonia colors are going to be far more permanent and have more longevity than your standard non-ammonia because we have the extra additive. So sometimes people say, well, I don't want to have an extra additive. Well, people use bond builders. They use all sorts of things as an additive to enhance the performance. So we made it where you have to have the metasilicate, the cream base, because the active alkaline component can't live in the tubes of color for more than 24 hours or so. So we can't put that in there and then ship it to you and expect you to use it in the time frame. So instead, it's an extra component, and think of this as giving you your extra lift and your extra ability for great coverage. So when this line first came out, I used it solely for 6 months. I absolutely loved it and still do love it. It is something that I used on every single client and had 100% success. So there really is no missing piece to it. But just like I mentioned, having more spices in the kitchen or more ingredients to cook with, I think of Mask with Vibrochrome as going to be more of my silky or satin finish. So that's going to be kind of, it has a different shimmer. My Anew color has more of a dense velvety finish. So it has a little bit more intensity to the coverage, but also just an intensity, darker velvety finish. You're going to find that there's a little bit more of a violet base to a Anew color, whereas when you work with our Mask with Vibrochrome, it's sitting a little more blue. So that finish will look differently depending on what you're using it on. Then of course, our activators are going to be the same, having a 5, 10, 20, 30, 40. But the difference being is when I say a 20 volume can give you 1 level of lift, with the non-ammonia color, the key word is up to 1 level of lift. So the rule of thumb for that is I say if you have a finer texture of hair, you'll get 1 level of lift with a 20 volume for our non-ammonia. These are heavier because they're full. So a 20 volume on finer texture of hair will give you 1 level of lift. For thicker, coarser, wiry hair, we say up to, so it may not give you a full level of lift with a 20, which means for thicker, coarser, wiry hair, you may need to bump up your activator. The other thing I like to say is split it in the middle around a level 6. Anything that is darker than a level 6, right, is going to not give you that level of lift, where anything lighter than a level of 6 will. So keep in mind how dark you're going, but also what the texture of hair, and that's why the keyword is up to. So if we look at it, our 5 volume was created in a new color, our non-ammonia color line, to be used with our pure pigments, which we have a red, an orange, a yellow, a blue, and a violet. I think I listed them all. And so, oh, and a green, sorry, I forgot the green. So that's what you're going to see for your fun colors. In this case, you also can intermix these together, so you can be quite creative, and you're going to mix them with your pure colors, your cream base, and the 5 volume. The 10, the 20, the 30, and the 40 are meant to be used with our colors. So in that case, when we're looking at how those colors are going to work, the base is going to be a little bit more violet, and the great coverage rule is different. You actually can get great coverage with any single tube. So that means there is more of a brown component in all of the colors. I personally still like to add a double natural or a natural to get more solid gray coverage, because of the fact if I'm going to do a copper, it can still give me a copper coverage and give me great coverage. But if I use a copper on white hair, it is going to be a lot brighter. So I still like to add my naturals or my double naturals in for great coverage. The number system is slightly different. So you're going to see that the 1 is not sitting as much blue. The 1 is sitting more of a bluey green. The 2 is going to be more of a violet iris, and then all the way the same. And there is no 8 in a new color. So the difference is in mask, you're going to take out the 8 and the 1 becomes sort of the bluey green for the reflect. You're also going to know that the lifting is going to give you up to instead of the full, and there is no ammonia, but you're going to have the ability to get still the full gray coverage and full ability to lift. With that, keep in mind that metasilicate here has quartz crystal. So the natural ingredient that you're going to look in this gives the ability to give us that extra lift, but also has a higher reflect than diamonds. That means the shine factor when you're using the metasilicate is out of this world. So you've got tons of sparkle and shine, as well as the natural color pigments that exist in a new color. Then, one of the things that I don't want us to forget that is my favorite portion, I'm going to say probably my favorite, I shouldn't have said it for sure, is the fact that a new color has a 000 booster. The 000 booster has the ability to lift cosmetic color out of hair. That is not the case in Mask with Fiberchrome. So how would I like to use that? So let's say, for example, my hair is this way. My hair is a level 1. And I wanted to get my hair to be more of a level 3. Now, automatically, I can't get it quite there in that go, but I also wanted to see more mahogany. So I could change my root formula and I could add more mahogany and more, let's say, go with a level 2. So let's go with, I'm going to go with like a level 3 mahogany, and I'm going to go with a level 2 brown. Then I could go ahead and paint this all through my hair with the cream base and the activator to remove the cosmetic color. What's incredible about non-ammonia is because it lightens at such a gentle and controlled factor that you don't get the same unwanted pigments that you get with ammonia. So you would basically almost shift it to the natural underlying pigment, but very, very gentle. So I could remove a fair bit of this black out, just a tiny shift, so that then I could go ahead and put a mahogany straight through, and you would see that my hair would have a significant lighter factor. So for people that tend to get that over pigmentized, because keep in mind in any color line, every time you color, if you overlap, it will continuously go darker. So this could be a great support for you when you're, upside down. This could be a great support for you for when your clients return, where you could just kind of paint it on some of the bands just to shift. Because sometimes if it's a gentle shift and we get in there with bleach, what can happen with that is you can end up exposing too much, and now you're trying to go back the other way. And when the client leaves, it could look good, but if they don't maintain it properly at home, now they fade and they got that light brand. So a new color, I keep doing it upside down, a new color booster is going to give you the ability to just shift it out just slightly. So definitely something to consider, and one of my favorite things. So for here, when I kind of recap on this, A new color is non-ammonia. Some people have sensitivities, so it could feel on their scalp to irritation. But also keep in mind ammonia being a gas, which is going to be something you're inhaling, whereas a new color being water soluble. You're going to look at the natural vegetable-based color pigments, and you're going to look at the metasilicate coming from quartz crystal, which is going to give you that extra bit of lift and that extra bit of great coverage. Then you have the pure colors, which are your fun fashion colors, and you have your 000 booster, which can lift up cosmetic color as well as giving you the extra level of lift. So with that, you can see that now you have different options for what your clients may need, for what you may need, but also for different performance factors. That keeping in mind more of a blue base when you're looking at mask with Vibrochrome, a violet base for a new color. And a new color also has a non-ammonia bleach. So that's going to be a blue-based bleach, but it has the ability to lift with some gentle control, and it is some of our artists' top favorites. So they really enjoy that bleach factor. So maybe with that, we will jump into the bleaches for Davines, looking at the fact that we have Century of Light. Century of Light is somewhat newer, but not too new. I have to say that this has been one of an incredible supports for us to launch a new bleaching line with a hair protective booster. The hair protective booster has the ability to strengthen the bonds of the hair while you're lightening, but also protect for future purposes, but also protect from sun damage. So these are going to be all sorts of benefits to having a bond builder built in to your bleaches. Because we built this in, it doesn't actually need more processing time. Sometimes when you're adding something to an existing formula, the problem is that that existing formula then is changed. And with this, you also don't have any specific follow-up other than ideally Davines products. So in this case, let's talk about what the differences are and what the names mean. I'm going to start with Progress. Progress, think of this as the name meaning it's progressing. It has the ability to go the distance. So Progress can give us 9 levels of lift. So this is going to be an incredible support for us. It is also lilac based. So when you look at it, you're going to see it has that gentle lilac tone to it. So of course it does have the hair protective booster built into it. Then we're going to think of liberty. What does the term liberty mean? Let's say freedom. So if we think of something that's free and freedom, it is freehand. So this is going to be your clay-based bleach. It also has the hair protective booster built in, and you're looking at getting 8 levels of lift. Keep in mind with a clay, when the clay goes on the hair, it sits on the surface. If it is too thin, the clay dries and it won't keep being active. So you do need to get a thicker application, knowing that the outside of it has a dry crust so that if other hair touches it, it doesn't change. But at the same time, it does need to have enough on it so that it stays moist inside so that it can continue to process. If you do the hair painting and then it starts to dust off, then it has stopped processing. So keep that in mind. With both of these bleaches, I do want to remind you that it's okay to reapply, specifically with the Progress. We believe when you're doing your bleaching applications, it's much better to kind of like wipe areas off and reapply than it is to go through that whole process of washing. When you go through that whole process, of washing, then you tend to create a sensitivity on the scalp, but you also start to kind of open and close the cuticle, which then shifts the process that you're going to have when you're lightening hair. So those are going to be options. Now we have tolerance. Tolerance on its own is really only going to give us up to 3 levels, but here's what's beautiful. It is dermatologically tested and approved. That means it is tolerance to tolerate it on your scalp. So it is a very, very gentle bleach. So ideally, it's not going to be what you do on your own for a full bleach system when you're wanting to get someone to platinum, but it can be used to kind of get some gentle shifting, and it is going to be more gentle, obviously, for the scalp. If you wanted to go for your full bleaching on the scalp to give you a nice platinum, then you're going to use these two together, the tolerance and the Progress together, which is going to give you up to 5 levels of lift. So now you have something that is dermatologically proved and tested, made with the hair protective booster, which is going to be in the Progress, not in the tolerance, because this is an oil base, going to be like, a different, more gentle. And then now you're going to be able to get the same performance that you're looking for, but with the fact of the hair protected booster and the fact that it's dermatologically tested and approved. With those, keep in mind you have everywhere from the gentlest lift to 3 levels all the way to your 9 levels. So you can have a great series of tools to support you with that. It will also come with a nice brochure that kind of gives you more details. And some of the mixing ratios are going to be more flexible than others. But keep in mind with that, whatever it is that you're doing, always measure and weigh and make sure that you're going to mix the same or intentionally different. If you end up mixing more activator a second time for a second application, you're potentially diluting your formula, which means you won't get the same, effect. Of course, we often like to have a certain consistency when we're working with Liberty, which is your hair painting, because of the fact that you're looking at, maybe the humidity or the heat. Those are going to maybe make the bleach feel or move differently, but also personal preference. So once you figure out what that is, then make that the same the next time you remix it so that you get the same performance and you get the predictability. So, sorry, I think I need some water. But yeah, so that's where I would kind of encourage you to get familiar with what it is that you want to work with and measure always. I think that I forgot to mention with a new color what the mixing ratio was. So with that, when you're mixing, you're going to do 1 part of your color, 1 part of your cream base, and 2 parts of your activator. So as I mentioned in the very beginning, for sustainability reasons, how we would mix that would be, say you do 10 grams of color, 10 grams of cream base, and if we're doubling, then you're going double of the 10. So you're saying 10 and 10 is 20, and so 20 would be of your activator. So again, you can see how little of the tube of color you're using, which is why we can get away with such a small tube, but also based on the natural color pigments is why we're going to see it being a smaller tube as well. So those are going to be some of the features and benefits to having both of those colors. Again, I found that I could solely survive on a new color. So definitely for me, if I was behind the chair again, I would have both. I'm going to guess that probably my clientele, I would split to be about 1/3 a new color and 2/3 mask with Vibrochrome. And that's just based on the fact of kind of the mask with Vibrochrome line being a bigger line with more reflex and different tones to pick from. But of course, I could survive solely. If I was a booth rental or suite rental, I probably would go solely, maybe with a new color, just for the fact of a smaller space. That's going to probably be more enclosed even now. And just knowing if gas and it's emitting in the environment, that it would be a better choice for me, knowing sometimes in the past my sensitivities to ammonia. But again, different options to consider. And the Century of Light, the activators are going from mask with Vibrochrome. So mask with Vibrochrome activators are going to be used with mask with Vibrochrome. They're going to be used with Century of Light, and they're going to be used with our View. So our View is a beautiful Demi-Permanent line. This is going to be something that I think you will absolutely adore. It is going to be a gel application, and we are going to notice the fact that you're going to have the ability to give a color and a finish without it being permanent. So who would you use this on? For one, absolutely for toning. So when people think of a gel color that they've maybe used in the past, where you kind of pull it through mids to ends, I would always want to use the View for that mids to ends. And here's the reason why. It's an acidic based color, which means it has the ability and will close the cuticle down. So you want to have that cuticle closed to give you longevity of the color, but it also gives a shinier, softer finish. So when you want to have your hair looking kind of almost like a hair ad, then definitely using View from mids to ends. So my formula, even on my own hair, is I use mask with Vibrochrome on my regrowth. And no matter what, I always use View mids to ends. View timing can be anywhere from a few minutes all the way up to 20 minutes. For more longevity with View, because it is going to be more about 21 washes or so, then I'm going to recommend that you're going to leave more of the 20 minutes completely if you can. And so with that, I always put, my regrowth, say, for 15 minutes, and then the last 20 minutes I pull View through, even with my hair as short as it is. but people are always mentioning the fact that my hair looks very soft and shiny and touchable. I do use hair products in it, and of course using Davines, but at the same time, you definitely are going to find that View is going to help with that type of finish. So mixing ratio. Mixing ratio with View is going to be 1 part of our View to 1 part of our 10 volume. So in this case, you're going to have your different options. So people always want to know, what are your some favorite options for View? So I'm going to share a few. So I don't even think I have the one here that I was thinking of. Well, 922, always people's straightforward one because 22 is violet, violet. But I'm going to tell you my personal favorite I love is the 978. 7 is going to be beige and an 8 is going to be green. So just a little bit of that extra control in the green, but it gives a very, very neutral kind of wheat finish as opposed to something that's looking more of a violet finish. Obviously it's not violet, but just in that control for yellow. So 922 is a great one. 978 is another good one. And then 932. We also have a 721, which is an incredible drop root. And so if you ever wanted to do some gentle gray blending, View is incredible. It also is a great support for toning, but it also is nice for people that just want to be able to kind of have something that is slowly going to wash out and doesn't shift their base or their color at all. When you think of what's in the ingredients, we use ingredients that are going to have olive oil in it, and the olive oil is going to be incredibly softening. We also saved some of the olive farms from becoming extinct by supporting the olive oil in our ingredients. So in this factor, you're going to get tons of shine, tons of softness, but also from a sustainability standpoint of supporting some of these local farms within Italy. So these are all of the factors that are kind of added in together. But of course, for me, the performance is incredible. We also have some fun fashion shades within this. So we have a steel, an amethyst, a quartz, and a steel, amethyst, quartz. Oh my gosh, I'm just drawing a blank. Steel, amethyst, quartz. What am I missing? Someone tell me. Steel. Charcoal. I'm like, what am I missing? Charcoal, yes, charcoal. And we also have a clear gloss. So those are going to be all of the different versions that you're going to have to be able to best support what it is you need for your Demi-Permanent. So again, I would use it for all of my gray coverage, for your kind of mid-lengths to ends pull through. I would use it for toning, and I would also use it for any gentle gray blending. For guys specifically, when you're looking at wanting to have gray blending, they don't want it to shift their natural level because that's where they end up getting too much warmth or the brassiness that they're not liking. So last but absolutely not least is going to be our finest pigments. Our finest pigments is completely a direct dye. So this is looking at up to 98% naturally derived, and there is 0 activators involved. It literally comes in a container like this. When you see the darker plastic, you're going to know that it's meant to protect the natural ingredients and natural pigments from the sunlight and from basically damage. So with that, you're going to notice that this literally can be mixed on its own. If you wanted to mix a series of these together, you mix them in a bowl, and then once you mix it, you can actually look at it on a cotton ball or even on a white piece of paper, and you're going to be able to see what that shade looks like. I often think the nice way to think of how does this finish is it's almost like a top coat of nail polish. So it just kind of has that sheer feeling. So it really doesn't give you great coverage, and even not quite gray blending like View would give us. But at the same time, it can kind of like give that nice shimmer, but it's incredible for giving bright vibrancy, but also being able to shift color from this point of having not shifting the natural base, but shifting kind of the reflect of the color. With that, it is going to be easy to use once you understand how the book works. So as you can see here, there's a clear gloss. That basically is like a complete treatment. You're going to see that there's incredible ingredients. There's like a rose oil that has an incredible fragrance and it is light, but it just feels like a spa experience. Then you have a 3 to 9 as natural levels. So those are going to be the options that you have to give us kind of a neutral feeling. And if you wanted to try any gray blending, I probably would work in those forms. Then when you move down, you're going to see that this is ash, pearl, sand, and golden. These are not an ash out of 5, 6, and 7. There's only one tube of ash, and it's what it looks like on a level 5, 6, and 7. So it's nice because it automatically shows you, sorry, where's my lighting? It shows you what those are going to look like. When it is highlighted with blue, this tells us that it is most effective, meaning it's going to be the best results and most truest at a 7. So of course you can use an ash on an 8, 9, and 10, but if you did, it could be quite like concrete, like it could be very ash. So they're just basically kind of coaching you through with the swatch book of what is going to be ideal. When you see a D, that means decolorized. So this is a pearl, and they're saying it works beautifully on a 10 or decolorized. They're saying if you used it on a 9, you may not see it. So that's kind of how this is dictating to use it. Sand shows us on a 6, 7, 8, and 9, and it's saying it's most effectively visual on a 7. And as we go to the gold, going to be a 6, 7, 8, 9, and most effective on an 8. Now when we move to the other page, you're going to see we have copper, red, and mahogany. Love seeing what they look like on decolorized hair. And these again are incredible for tint backs, because if you wanted to do a tint back and you needed to put as much pigment back into the hair prior, you could go ahead and use any of those shades. What you would find too is you could just do an application with finest pigments, blot off the extra, and then just put the mask with fiberchrome or a new color straight on top. You actually wouldn't have to completely rinse it out. You just don't want it kind of like heavy and drippy. So this is going to be a great support for you to have more longevity for that, but also like a conditioning treatment that has the ability to give some color pigments. So with that, you've got your direct color that you're sitting at when you use your finest pigments. You have your demi finish when you're looking at your view. You have your lightening capability when we're thinking of the century of light, even having the dermatologically tested and approved, but also the protective booster in there, the bond builder. And then of course, our permanent color lines, which are ammonia and non-ammonia, giving you different finishes, giving you different tools to support, and so many different options. So with that, I'd love to see if you have any questions on anything that you wanted to get more information on. But with that, I'll go ahead and let you guys, share in the group chat. I'm actually not going to unmute you because sometimes people are already having side conversations and I don't want to put anyone on the spot or else to be able to create any unnecessary background noise. So just unmute yourself if you have any questions or feedback or message into the group chat. And thank you again. It was really lovely to connect with all of you this morning. And I hope that there's a few fun extra tools and supports that you can take with you from today. You guys are all good? Well, I'll go ahead and stop the recording, but I'll stay on for a few extra minutes. But again, I want to tell you how grateful I am and thank you.